$321.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Are there any corrections? Seeing none? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, 4-0.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the next agenda item is the announcements, and the only thing that I wanted to show everybody was this framed little medal, which was a medallion from the 150th anniversary of Goffstown, the incorporation of Goffstown. This was sent to the Board of Selectmen a few years back by a citizen, and the board had it framed. And but I just wanted everybody to be aware that we have had probably every 50 years or so, we've had this ceremony. So in preparation for the 250th and all the people who are working towards its enjoyment. With that, next item, we're running a few minutes early, is public comment.
Well, actually, I probably should have one. I was remiss last week in thanking the
Okay.
both the Goffstown and the Penardville Lions Club for organizing the Business Expo, which was a very big success. A lot of the business owners were very complimentary of it. But more importantly, as you mentioned before with the medallion there, it was a fundraiser for the 250th. So both the Goffstown Lions Club, really has done a great job in raising funds for the 250th, and very appreciative. I didn't get a chance to thank them last week. So.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll go back to public comment, which we're running a few minutes early, and I don't believe there's anybody here for public comment. If not, I'm going to ask Fire Chief O'Brien if he would like to come up. Are you expecting anybody else, or are you by yourself, Chief?
Just by myself.
Just checking.
If you like anybody else, I can call them in, phone a friend.
Well,
Call in the whole crew.
Good evening.
good evening, Chief.
A couple weeks ago, I think it was actually 3 weeks ago, we had the opportunity to look at a new demo ambulance for purchase. It's in the budget, and it's planned for replacement of, or to purchase a new ambulance this year, and under the EMS budget. And we looked at the demo ambulance, and it was a vehicle that we probably should take advantage of due to the price break on it, and the vote was made by the board to do that. We have further contacted with the vendor to commence with a contract, and they're moving on that. The other item that was still out there was the disposition of the 2005 ambulance, or the ambulance 1 that we have now. This ambulance, our option is either to trade in the ambulance or to possibly keep the ambulance as a third ambulance or a reserve type of ambulance. It was asked by the board to have it evaluated by Mark Urella at DPW to see if it was mechanically sound to be put in that role. It was evaluated back last week by Mark and also by Jess Cook. He's our in-house mechanic that does some work on vehicles also. And they both felt that with the recent repairs that were done on the vehicle, being that there was repairs done on the motor, the turbo, and the diesel, along with some repairs to the front end and the brakes, that they felt it was a sound backup ambulance, and that it could be used for such. They felt that being in that third role or backup role will be just fine for that ambulance. There's some minor corrosion issues in the back that we may have to contend with over time, but that shouldn't be something that would break the bank. Currently, the mileage on that vehicle is approximately 63,000 miles. It has over 4,000 miles on it. Now, the trade-in value on that vehicle is right now from that vendor is $10,750, and that is probably the best we'll be able to get out of that for trade-in value. With that said, I recommend to the board that we do retain ambulance one, the 2005 ambulance, as a third or backup ambulance for multiple reasons, being said that it's being sound as far as the motor goes, and the fact that we are getting busier and busier when it comes to ambulance calls. And it seems like on a daily basis, we constantly have 2 ambulances out on calls at once. So if one ambulance does go out for repairs or has an issue, that we can bring this ambulance back up into response status and use it to serve the town.
Thank you, Chief. Next question?
Chief, could you contrast the amount of use that ambulance would get on a frontline basis versus in a reserve? Because obviously the question that's going to come up is, if the ambulance is still good, why are we replacing it?
Currently, that ambulance is being used the most. It's being used at night by nighttime personnel, also during the day. So it's handling 90% of all calls at night and 50% of all calls during the day. So you're talking approximately probably 1,300 calls or responses annually, if kept in a frontline status. And also it does other responses like fire responses and ancillary responses, checking CO alarms and so forth and so on. So you're talking a multiple uses. It's the busiest truck that we have in the station right now. If we continue using it like that, I can guarantee you we're going to have increased demands on it mechanically, and you're not going to see it last as long as you would if it was in a third line status.
Just to follow, do you foresee any potential moving down the line of utilizing that ambulance to generate revenue?
It's possible. It's something we can consider. We've been talking with St. Anselm's College to see if right now they contract with a private vendor to stand by at certain events, such as football games and commencement and a few other larger events, because we cannot offer a spare ambulance for those details. This might be an option for them where we could possibly be utilized for those events. They do pay a private vendor to come in and do those details, and it's revenue that we might be able to tag into. They said they would be more than happy to talk to us if this ambulance were available.
Scott?
I don't have any.
Oh. Dave.
Chief O'Brien, or maybe Sue, the funding for the new ambulance, was it a separate article, or was it in the operating funds?
It was in the operating budget out of EMS.
Okay. My concern was, if it was a separate article, did the article say replace the old vehicle? But
No.
it's not a concern.
No. Chief, I have a couple of questions. On the usage, if we were to retain this and use this as you suggested, or for revenue generation, is that going to require any additional personnel?
I don't believe so. We can use existing personnel that we have on the roster that are qualified to stand by with that truck.
Okay, and I guess at some point though, how do we compare the expense versus income to see if it's a net gain or if it's a break even?
Right. We have the ability to track all the expenses that go towards the ambulance. For example, for tonight, we also track, for example, maintenance. We track maintenance on each vehicle, not just globally for ambulances. So I can tell you how much to the penny we spent just to maintain this particular truck. We can do the same thing, and we're going to track that. Also, we can track how often that the ambulance was used, and personnel costs for details or other, say, transfers.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Scott, do you have a question?
No?
Oh, Sue?
In the way you describe generating revenue, it would be as a special detail. And what have we budgeted for special details?
Nothing under the EMS fund. We did budget some detail under fire, but but we probably would have to, the way we would expend until we budget for it, is if it was a regular hour-by-hour shift.
And I do have one additional question. If we did not take the 10,000 and change as a trade-in now, what time frame do we have for them to extend that offer to us?
I expect that the truck will be ready for delivery in 2 to 3 weeks, so that offer will be standing until then.
Until we take delivery, or is there a time, 30 days?
I believe it's within 30 days of delivery.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
My only comment would be, there is a possibility if you have 3 vehicles, it may also prolong the other first 2 frontline ambulances to a degree.
Right.
So, maybe, if you had it for a year or 2, I don't know, this sounds like there's a reverberation. Andrew,
There seems to be feedback.
there's feedback?
It's from the speaker in the rear of the room.
There is a possibility that we may prolong the other frontline vehicles simply because you can, when
Rotate 'em.
when you're rotating them, and that's also, something that should be factored in.
Right.
We also didn't discuss one thing, and that was, we've talked about transport. I mean, we have Hillsborough County Nursing Home, we have Bel Air Nursing Home, we have a few assisted living facilities in Goffstown. To me, that would also be the possibility where it could be a revenue source in the future, as long as we come up with a plan to do that. And, again, we're fortunate to have a fairly large facility in our town, and whether it be transports to local hospitals or, hospitals in southern New Hampshire, even Boston, those are possibilities for us.
Absolutely, and that's something, once we know we have this vehicle available to us, and it's something we want to explore, we can start looking at relationships with those facilities to see what needs they have.
That's what I envisioned for this vehicle as well. And the nature of transfers like that are typically advance notifications, so we wouldn't necessarily be using our on-duty personnel and increasing the need for more personnel. Typically, you could have an availability list of, call firefighters, EMTs, all of your personnel, and then just schedule. So if there were transfers tomorrow, you would know who was available next up on the call list. That would be built into your charge, if you will, and then recoup
Right.
the generation. I just have one follow-up question. As far as equipment, how are we, as far as equipment that you're going to be taking from this ambulance to the new one, or is there any equipment?
Well, the only thing that I was, with this new ambulance, we'll be purchasing a new stretcher that goes along with it. That's typically the way you'd like to do it, so you have a fresh ambulance, a fresh stretcher that goes along with it, because that's the one piece of equipment that takes the hardest abuse. There may be some needs to purchase some disposable equipment, but that's something that we may have in stock already. So I don't anticipating some incredible cost to this. We already have a monitor that we can put on it, a cardiac monitor, defibrillator, and other equipment, so I think we're going to be in good shape.
Chief, when did you say we anticipate delivery of the new ambulance?
The vendor said about 2 to 3 weeks.
2 to 3 weeks. Okay, I guess the only question that I have, I mean, we have in front of us $10,000 in change that we would get as a revenue if we were to trade this in, versus retaining this and trying these revenue generation, let's say with the transports and as a third ambulance.
Or standby events, sure.
Right. Is there any way that you could do a cost estimate as to breaking down the costs perhaps on, not necessarily by the hour, but let's say we did a event at St. A's that was gonna be a 4-hour event. I'm not to get into all the detail at this point, but obviously you'd be charging them a certain amount, and you might have to base that on, you may not be able to base it on 4 hours, you may have to, some other increment that you might have to do because of the logistics of the operation.
Sure.
But the cost basis, would you be able to come back and say, if we did an event for, let's say, St. A's or some other place, and it was a 4-hour event, could you break this down somehow to find out if we were breaking even, if it was costing us anything, or if, what the gain might be? And also with a transport, because I have no idea how the transports are set. I assume they'd be set similar to the way we set the rates for the ambulance fees.
Right, the ambulance fees are depending on what skill is given during the transport. There is a separate fee for non-emergency rates, and they're slightly lower than the emergency level rates. And it makes sense, only because you're not using as much equipment typically on a transfer. It's basically a palatable transport for a person to be laying down for a transport, and that's what you're providing. As far as the standby events, typically, just making some phone calls around to some of the private vendors. They're making anywhere from $100 to $150 per hour, depending on the event and the level of care they want. For example, St. A's has, I know, a minimum 5 to 6 events that they hire an ambulance out. So just looking at just even covering the costs, you're probably going to meet your maintenance costs for that vehicle just by doing those standby events. And then the transfers would be something up and above, I believe. Again, not knowing how many transfers or transports are to be had from any of the facilities in town. Again, that would be a relationship issue, knocking on their doors to find out what we could do for them.
Right, and I guess the reason I'm asking the question is, I'm just trying to get a handle on where that stands versus the 10,000 and change, and let's say $10,500. Is this something that we may recoup in 6 months? Is it something that's gonna be 3 years to recoup? I guess that's where I'm
That's something,
coming
it may not be a tangible thing to be had up front. For example, one of our current ambulances right now has to go back to the dealership to get some repairs done. And if it's gone, say, 3 days. So that's 3 days of potential lost transport fees because we have to call in mutual aid because we don't have a second ambulance available. So, it's those instances where we have that ambulance available, that third ambulance to move up into the line and just take those transports as they're needed. So we average right now for an average transport is, say, $500. And even if it's one transport per day, it's $1,500 right there. But we won't know that until that happens.
Nick?
Well, just in following along, it may take a little bit of work, but I think you can do an average of concurrent calls, say in a certain period of time, and kind of put a dollar figure on what the potential loss per day would be of not having 2 ambulances, and then maybe put, as Selectman Devanza mentioned, do some hypotheticals. We have Bel Air, we have Hillsborough. What would a typical transfer from nursing home A to this medical facility generate in revenue for a standard transfer?
Sure.
And then we can kind of get a picture and say, okay, is it realistic to say we're going to get 3 transfers a week or 2 transfers a week? And that really doesn't add up to what we may lose. Whatever, we can run kind of scenarios and see, is it worth keeping it, or is that $10,000 best left back in the budget?
Absolutely. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier is we know that just historically that about a third of the time, every 1 out of 3 calls is a simultaneous call for us. So knowing that is we have a high probability that we're going to need that second ambulance for some kind of response. Whether it ultimately transports a patient or not, That's to be said. But historically, it's 1 every 3 calls is simultaneous. And I can work on some hypothetical figures, say, say 3 transports per week, or I can be real conservative with that way.
Or just do it per, one transfer from the various facilities,
Right.
and then we can kind of, you can then say that, maybe we'll do 3 a week, or it's reasonable to do 5 a week, or 1 a week, and then you can just multiply it.
Without a doubt, I think that the value of this, having a reserve truck, goes into possibly the call that it doesn't have to respond on. It's available, ready to respond when that other ambulance is tied up, or when you have that ambulance that's out of service for a few days for repair, it's stepping in the line and it's available to respond if needed. So
I'm in favor of retaining the vehicle because we're gonna squeeze some more life out of it rather than being a frontline vehicle. So I'm cautious that we don't look upon this as a growth in our ambulance fleet and therefore a growth in our labor requirements. So I'm happy that this is a standby ambulance based on one of the 2 front lines being down for maintenance. And you can document that. Vehicle's down for maintenance for 3 days, and you know in your records how many times this standby went out. And you can calculate, well, we didn't lose a mutual aid run.
Right.
So that's hard money you could calculate. And I like the discussion we've just had that this is could be an ambulance for non-emergency scheduled runs, where you might call in somebody just for a few hours to do that.
I really appreciate that discussion. It's something that I think needs to be explored further.
Yeah, I want to just caution us all that we don't think this is going to be a 3rd ambulance growth and a 3rd labor pool. It's, at some point, this 3rd ambulance is going to totally die, excuse the pun, and
Pass on.
okay, and we'll reach a decision despite how well it has served us. It's gone.
At some point in time, if it mechanically does not suit our needs as far as budgetarily wise and fiscally wise, absolutely, it's the joy of having this ambulance as a reserve. We can just send it out to pasture.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Any other questions? And how much time do you think you would need to come up with some of this information?
I guess the question would be is how definitive of numbers would you want from the nursing homes, or we just want to a figure on 1 per week? Because again, it'd be knocking on their doors and opening up a relationship with the folks there to find out what kind of needs they would have at each of these facilities, and that takes time, versus just estimating conservatively.
Back in 6 months.
I'll only speak for myself. I would want something simple. This is relatively new. A lot of times when we do something, these in-depth things, you spend 20 hours on it, and we look at it and like, okay, and 20 hours of your time is important. So I would just, as Nick said before, what do we estimate for one of these service calls to be? We can then extrapolate that out and multiply it times 2 a week, 3 a week, 6 a week, and figure out what we might have. And then the only other intangible would be ones, like you said, at St. Anselm's or other events. If we have an idea that we might be able to do a few of those, whether it be football games or
Presidential debates.
et cetera, and we know that those could be anywhere from, say, 5 to 10, same thing. Well, what is it per day? And if we were to get, for one day, it's this, and if it's the whole 10 days or 20 days that they contract out, this is the potential revenue, and I'm good with that.
So 3 unit costs, standby for events,
Right.
transports, and then the average medical run, because you
Right.
may use it that way
Right.
too.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And perhaps just an idea, a suggestion, because we don't really know, and how many of these transports would be done, and it's also going to be limited to what we have for employees.
Right. And that's
on it,
what's,
so.
the benefit of looking at non-emergent transfers is they're typically booked in advance, and we can let the nursing home or the facility know in advance that we can or can't do it for whatever reason, whether we need the truck because it's now frontline, or we just don't have the staffing available.
Need a motion, or?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think the chief understands what we're looking for, and he'll come back in a week or two.
Absolutely.
No, I'm talking about, do we need a motion to retain, we're making this decision, or do you want to have that before you make the decision to retain it?
I was looking to have that information
Okay.
before I make my decision, and I assume that, okay,
That's perfect.
very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Just want to talk about the,
We
Oh.
put that off, they wanted the information a week before, and
Okay.
we'll schedule you for next week.
very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
The intermunicipal agreement, we're not,
Correct.
And we're not discussing it tonight.
okay, okay.
I want to review it for a week.
Okay, no,
Thanks,
that's
Chief.
fine. Okay, and we're running a few minutes early, but we can go ahead to the town administrator's report.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have your weekly meeting scheduled. Tomorrow's EDC. Thursday is 250th Anniversary Planning Committee. Your consensus folder tonight includes AP warrants and the event permit license for an Easter egg hunt at Bartlett School on April 16th.
Motion to accept the consensus folder?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Correspondence, you have a letter from Deborah Esler, District Manager, Customer Service and Sales from Northern New England Postal Service, basically denying the request for unique zip code for Pinardville routes because it's not 75% maximized or full in its use. There's an appeal process. Also, Senate Ayotte's office is willing to send a letter of support, but they suggest it may be more successful if we deleted St. Anselm College from the zip code change.
Okay, Nick?
I just had a question on that line of thinking. If the denial was based on the fact that it's not maximized in its use, how will pulling out a zip code help that?
Because they don't assign a new zip code number until a zip code is maximized.
Yes.
Okay, but
By pulling it out, you'd have less
now we have less.
maximization.
Right.
Well,
So how does that help?
it depends how many delivery addresses St. A's is considered. I look upon the fact that the regional office disapproved it, but they most likely don't have the authority to waiver the 75% usage criteria, where the higher authority would.
Okay.
And if the justifications we've made for economic reasons for this town perhaps could help on that waiver of the 75% rule at the higher level, in addition to having a senator endorse it, and in addition to taking out a very complicated business that does, have the 102 address.
The denial wasn't based on that.
No.
No, the dial wasn't.
No. The recommendation,
I'm just confused how that even, is that complicating the issue? It's, because that issue wasn't even brought up in their denial.
right. It was just a discussion I had with Senator Ayotte's aide, and he suggested that it would probably see more success if we carved out that business.
I would, it sounds like we need to move forward and hope for success on the appeal.
Scott, did you have
I guess I have a different opinion. And my initial thought process was to send the letter out to see what we would get from the post office. And now that the post office has said no, I'm fine with saying, this is it, we're done. I don't think this is that pressing of an issue. And I've heard more people against it than for it, in terms of constituents. I just don't think this is, I would just assume let this thing die, but that's just my opinion. Just let it go.
Recent events at the state level in terms of motor vehicle registrations at auto dealerships is an added concern of mine in losing revenues for the town. Somehow the current state motor vehicle software system jumbles up our 03102 with Manchester's 03102, and people in Pinardville receive notices from the city of Manchester to renew their motor vehicles. I don't have any hopes that that's going to be rectified by the new electronic vehicle registration program that it looks like they'll be embarking on. I believe it passed, was it the Senate? And it's going to the House, or one of them anyway. So I think that's another reason. A loss of revenue is big, but we don't know how big, and we can't get our hands around that number. And I think it's important that Pinardville either be 03045, and I'm not sure how many spaces, when Dunbarton went on their own and came out of the 03045, I would expect it freed up some spaces here, but I don't know if it's sufficient to,
Well, they said we're not even 75%.
They said not close to being maximized. That was their quote.
Yes.
that's the Manchester 03102. What I'm saying is, what's the maximization of 03045 right now?
It's, the post office on Church Street, it's not the amount of 9 digits on top of the 5 that's the limiting factor. It's space, sorting space, vehicle space, to handle the 4 additional routes, which are much further away from the office.
Scott?
Again, I don't claim to be an expert in the U.S. Post Office, but from everything that I am reading, they are sizing the U.S. Post Office. They're closing down post offices throughout the country, although not in New Hampshire, from what I hear. But with competition from FedEx and UPS and others, and people doing emails, and the number of pieces of mail is significantly diminished. I just don't see the post office in this particular time, when I think they're going to be downsizing by 7,500 employees over the next 6 months, that this issue is going to all of a sudden rise up and be something that's important to a U.S. post office that's losing like $8 billion a year, and they have to consolidate their operations, and we're asking them to create more zip codes. I just don't see it happening, but then again, if the board wants to go there, that's fine.
We're asking, I'll offer some more information then. The additional zip code is not forcing the station that's going to handle the new zip code any increase in personnel. The same station will be receiving the mail in from their regional sorting facilities. The same 4 postal carriers that do 4 routes will work out of the same building and do the same sorting routine. We can submit this application once every 10 years. So if we make a decision tonight to wash our hands of it, well, we're not going to look at this for another 10 years. We might as well exploit the appeal as much as we can right now.
He's before me, I'll go.
I kind of agree with Selectman Gross, because I haven't heard an outcry. And even if they were to say, okay, go ahead with this, they're going to do a poll. They don't just make a unilateral change to people's zip code. And I don't think you're going to have, personally, a majority of those people voting yes to change their address.
I guess the question, what Sue brought up, is how would we resolve the issue of registrations down the road? And as Mr. Pierce said, it would be for 10 years. How would we resolve that revenue issue? Or would we just be blind to that and we wouldn't know how many were going that way?
I think that in response to, because where I was going, in response to what you're asking, what I see here is the issue of the lost revenue, which has been ongoing for us, okay? We don't really have an idea what it is. The other issue that I see, though, is doing this change, all of a sudden, when this, if we were to go forward and we were to appeal this, let's say, and we go a little bit further, and then they come out with we either have a public hearing, or they send out their survey that Selectman Capasano brought up. At that point in time, people are gonna be in here wanting to know where this suggestion of the zip code came up. And while I understand from our perspective that we see a revenue loss, I don't perceive that the average person who's affected by this is going to look at it and put a value the change the way we value the change as far as revenue. What the loss might be to them as a taxpayer versus what they're gonna go through to effectuate the zip code change on everything else, they may perceive as, to them, they don't see the value of it. So I think that's what we're up against.
And it's an education and public awareness issue, and I think we have to deal with that before any survey goes out, and I think you need to have focus groups, reach out to neighborhoods.
Several of you are in the insurance business. Do vehicle owners incur a higher rate because they're associated with Manchester?
Yes, they do.
They do.
We've been through that. That's one of the things the committee went through.
That has nothing to do per se with, I believe that it's rated based upon neighborhood. It is not just zip code.
Right, it's rated on where you live.
Where you live,
When I lived in
not where you register
Bernardville,
a car.
I had a Manchester mailing address, but I
Still get a
told my
Goffstown
insurance
rate.
agent I lived in Goffstown.
Right.
And that did make a difference.
Yes.
Not everybody maybe is astute enough to do that.
We have other revenues that potentially we may be losing as a result of the zip code also. And absent auditing, and that's the only way to figure it out, your Comcast revenues are generated and they're entered by zip code into their system. You know, we're not gonna pay to audit Comcast to see if all those 1,200 households are franchise taxes coming to Goffstown or going to Manchester.
Mhm. Right, don't forget, we're also gonna have many of the businesses that are gonna be affected by this too. So it's just, I mean, I understand we have 45 days for this appeal. If we don't go through with this appeal, then it's gonna be an issue for a while, so that's what we're gonna have to determine.
He's ahead of me again.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, no.
That may be, we're gonna be entering into negotiations with Comcast on their franchise. That may be a question we might want to pose to them, is how exactly do they set the boundaries and bring those concerns to them to get assurances that they are actually looking at the geographic
And we have.
boundaries of
We
Goffstown?
brought that to them 10 years ago when we had the
And their
franchise
answer?
agreement. Their answer then was a little different than the answer now. I'm still waiting for an answer now. The answer then was they put some kind of suffix to determine, but I didn't get a list of which properties they had the suffix for Goffstown.
The only thing and I don't mean to, the only thing I'll say to that is when I moved to Bernardville and I had Comcast installed, and I called up to schedule it, I said, do you know where I am? I'm in Bernardville, I'm in Goffstown. Oh, yeah, absolutely, it's all covered, you're in Goffstown, and I waited, and they never came, and called them up, and they said, they couldn't find you, they were over on Orchard Street instead of Orchard Ave over on the other side of Manchester. So I had to wait another week for them to come, and after they assured us of how we weren't losing any revenue.
I'm sure that was traumatic. But anyway.
Absolutely.
Just going back to the revenue piece, and as Mr. Pierce said, it's gonna be 10 years before this comes back. I think it's just one of those issues that every now and then it pops its head. Everyone says, oh, it's not gonna go so easily and so quickly, and it gets passed down the road. And I think that just sometimes you just have to say, you know what, instead of passing it down the road, 10 years from now again, I think we should act on it. And I personally live in Bernardville. I really don't have a preference if it's 102 or 03045, 03102, but I do look at it as from a town, and is that there are just too many issues with revenue with this, and we're going, as we go more into the electronic age where it's being driven, and now with the registrations, we're just going to be losing more and more, and I think as a board, we've discussed in the past regarding that it's just not a tax issue that we deal with, it's a revenue issue that we deal with. And here's a perfect example where we have a revenue issue in front of us, and I think we should deal with it.
Mr. Chairman, we've had a very good pro and con discussion on this evening. Perhaps you'd like a motion?
That's up to the board. I mean, where do you
Fine.
guys wanna go with this?
Then,
Call the question. I'm ready.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we pursue the appeal process for the zip code change for the 102 zip. And to include the possibility that we're willing to have St. Anselm's College separated from this effort.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have one question that I'm gonna ask. If this motion includes the separation or not including St. A's, well, maybe I shouldn't ask the question.
When they're on TV, it always says Manchester, New Hampshire anyway, so what's the point?
Only for the Institute, because part of it is
Yeah.
in Manchester.
Well, I mean, then, you know, what I was trying.
Almost every
what I-
event, it says Manchester, New Hampshire, because
No.
it's the biggest city and
And people recognize it.
they
that way.
recognize it. It
No,
is what it is.
I understand that, but then what about any other person or business or entity that lives or exists right on borders St. A's properties or borders the Manchester line from being exempted from it also? So that's the only question only reason why I bring that up. If you're gonna have a waiver for one, how many waivers are you gonna have
And
for
how many
the?
have a national presence?
Well, I'm just bringing that question up. Any other questions?
I believe
Any-
Pizza Market does have a national presence. According, at least in my book, they do.
Well, you know, I'm just,
That might raise their assessment too.
no, then what it might do is it might
Remove the waiver?
might get them to petition the legislature that, you know, if that's the way you're gonna treat us, then we should be part of Manchester anyway, not Goffstown. But, any other
Question.
questions?
Do you want to remove, I will remove my second if you would like to remove the waiver.
I'll do that.
Okay.
A
We'll,
lot of deals going on.
yes. Well,
It's not a deal,
then
we'll just
the
make it
motion-
simple.
The motion is just the bare motion of, we will seek the appeal process.
I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Uh-oh, I'm on the fence now, huh?
No, you're supposed to
Bill
vote with us.
finally has to make a decision.
Isn't it a tiebreaker thing?
That's what chairs are for.
No, I'm gonna vote for it, just so that it can go forward and see what happens from it. But- So it'll be 3-2.
It's always a 3-2, and it's always different people. It's amazing
Yeah.
on this board.
Yeah, you can't predict it.
Hey,
It's not predictable. Okay, then you have a letter from Medville requesting forgiveness of fire inspection fees for underground oil storage tanks, which would be about $1,500 savings from, and that they would like to use that money as a match for their emergency generator,
Yeah,
correct?
I have a question, and I don't know if there's anybody here that's familiar with this. Are you familiar with this? What I gathered was that an inspection was $50.
Maybe lost the sheet.
Yes.
Yep.
How do you, I guess what I didn't understand, how do you go, at $50 per inspection, they were looking at a savings of how much?
1,500?
So how many of these inspections would?
How many tanks are there?
Yeah, I guess that's.
30 plus.
F-30,
Yep, 30-plus tanks are scheduled.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Tanks.
okay, I just wasn't,
They're budgeting to remove 30 tanks at some $80,000.
Cost, yep.
And then
I have a concern with this, waiving fees for one component of our population. We may have elderly folks in other, who have their own single-family residence. Are we gonna waive their fees? And I also I expressed concerns to Senator D'Alessandro about using federal taxpayer money for a private clubhouse, which I object to. I see the need to have a generator there, but I think it should be their expense, not public taxpayer money. And if there were, I find it almost incredible that we're gonna put a federal grant for an emergency generator in a private facility when we don't even have an emergency generator at Mountain View or the high school or Bartlett to power up our facilities. To me, a shelter should be inclusive. It should be for all citizenry, not just for one component of our citizenry. And I would wholeheartedly endorse an emergency generator grant for Mountain View Middle School or the high school, where the entire community, that would be a place for shelter. But I think having one event, which I know we did, and I can tell you that, with all due respect to the residents of Medville, I personally was there almost every single day. Some of you were there every single day checking in on them. We did open up emergency shelters. People did, we did go down there with food and other things. I think we were very responsive to their needs. But I just think that we have to look holistically at this, and this is something that is more, I believe it should be more for the entire community, not just for one segment of it. And that's why, again, I have an issue with, again, the waiving of fees for one particular group and not others, and then the whole issue of the whole generator thing. I think it should be at a school for the whole community.
Nick?
I share your concerns, but I tried to go further and think of how we could turn this into a positive. There are a number of things. One, as far as the fees, I think what they're planning on doing is, in an effort to save us manpower time, get all of the tanks ready so that it's just one visit. And then, in return, we would just give them one permit fee charge versus individual per tank. But where I disagree is I think we should still gather those fees. I don't think we should forgive the fees and have them use it as a match for a generator. I think we should get those fees. We should provide the match for the generator. But the only way we provide that generator is if we have a memorandum of understanding in place that the generator belongs to the town, and that clubhouse now becomes a shelter for the community. So, on one hand, if we have a power failure and that area is affected, that is that number of elderly population that we don't have to expend our resources to provide care for. If it is something, for instance, a flood down in the river, and we need a shelter, we know we have this facility available. I would hold them as part of that agreement to, within 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, those ADA improvements, the bathroom renovations to make them handicapped accessible, ramps, so that now, instead of trying to figure out, okay, where do we have an area to put individuals, we already have a shelter, we can get it certified by the Red Cross. It then becomes an asset of the community in return for providing that backup generator. So I look at it then as a win-win for both.
Steve?
Question, in speaking with that then, Nick, how many people could this facility hold? In other words, I guess my question would be, if we did have something on a large scale, would we want to have the only generator in town in the facility that, I don't know how many people this can handle, or we want it in a facility that can handle a larger group? How many could we handle within this facility?
Offhand, that goes by square footage. I don't
know, but
could answer.
if something was to happen, does it only handle their community, thus it really wouldn't benefit the rest of the community, or is this something that would handle overflow beyond their community?
But it may be a situation where we don't want to open up Mountain View Middle School. Maybe we have a small number of people and we just need a shelter to put them in, a warming station, a cooling station. It kind of fits that niche where we may want to segregate people with medical needs there versus in a larger shelter such as Mountain View.
And I understand where you're going, but I guess I still go back to the original question. How many people could this facility service?
Maybe the chief may have that.
Couple
I
hundred.
don't have an exact number.
I mean, just roughly.
There's 2 floors
Okay.
that are available. One has a kitchen area, and down below is a larger gathering area. But I have seen in the upstairs, I believe they had 10 or 15 at the last storm alone that we had there. So I would guess in upwards of 35 to 50,
Okay, thank you.
rough estimate.
You know, the only concern that I have by making it, designating it as a shelter for the community, is when we do this outside of the police station, since the police station is manned, when we do that at Bartlett, don't we get the Red Cross? Don't we get somebody that comes in and mans the facility? And I guess the question that I have is if we're gonna require Medville to be that facility, are we requiring Medville to be the ones that are going to man it, or are we going to also be the one, are we gonna provide the manpower to man it? I guess.
I won't put words in the chief's mouth, but I would think we would have a CERT team that we could call upon. and-
May I, for,
Go right ahead, Chief.
the last, I want to say it was the ice storm, it was the ice storm. Sue Jutras, the head of our CERT team, is a certified shelter manager through the Red Cross. And because the need was so great for so many shelters, the Red Cross put it in Sue Jutras's lap to manage that shelter on their behalf. Usually, on the other occasions as we've opened shelters, the Red Cross has in fact run the shelter. So, could the Red Cross run it? More likely, yes. More likely it'll be a regional one. But we have at least one person trained. Medford Farms and Village of Glen Falls have made indications to us that they're interested in the CERT team. Whether they're gonna join it or what is still up in the air, but they have put out feelers to us as far as what they can do to become part of the CERT team, which could lead into them taking care of their own shelter.
Dave?
My turn here. I'd caution us to not embrace this as using public money to provide the generator from the town aspect, because that's, the next step is we're sort of certifying that facility for public use. And I'd be cautious of us doing that. Would they be accepting non-Medville residents that need, shelter?
Under an emergency, they would have to, because it would
And that's-
fall under emergency management.
If we were providing public money to facilitate this generator, then yes,
Absolutely.
we would have to have an agreement that their facility is a public facility, and then it's not adequate right now. Kitchen space or bathroom requirements.
That's not,
Yeah.
as far as the
I mean,
kitchen.
they mentioned in their letter to us that
Yeah.
they promised some upgrades.
Nick?
Finish.
I'd stand off from
Thought he
this
was.
one and just let them, $4 to $5 a resident to pay the 1,500 is something that perhaps they should bear. And we should stand off from giving quasi-approval to this public shelter.
Nick?
I know the state emergency management is aware of this. They were at that meeting, and the association there qualifies, is a qualifying entity to receive the HMEP money, the Hazard Mitigation Emergency Planning. Thank you. So it's a little different than just, say, giving it to a private resident. It is a nonprofit association that does qualify to receive these funds. The town obviously would have to be the only entity that could apply for the grant. So again, I think as another tool in our emergency toolkit, having a shelter, and maybe one of the conditions is it goes through the Red Cross inspection and it is a certified shelter.
Scott?
I'm not gonna support this, and the primary reason is that we need an emergency generator at either the high school or Mountain View Middle School. That's where it's needed. It is already ADA compliant, it already gets annual fire inspections because it's a school, It is geared up for all this. It has the bathroom facilities, it has the kitchen facilities, it has all of those things. That's where federal grant and state grant money should be going, is to a community. And Mountain View Middle School is only 2 to 3 miles away from Medville Farms. And that is where the money should go. And I don't think we should waive fees. And if anything, I was not very pleased when Senator D'Alessandro was here, the fact that this board did not know that federal or state grant money was going to a private entity. Why weren't we asked as a board, hey, there could be some funds out there. Do you have any need for a generator, for a public facility? And we just had a problem, if you recall, the school, their generator, which backs up their water pumps for their fire suppression system, that failed, and they had to go and rebuild that. And remember, we talked with the superintendent of schools about what it would cost to get a generator. That's where the need is. And I don't feel comfortable that we're gonna sink money and endorse something for a private facility that is woefully inadequate to be a shelter in the first place.
So they did not repair that generator? Is
They
that what you're saying?
repaired it, but it's for fire suppression, and it has very limited electrical power. It powers up the lighting.
It is able to power a shelter.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's minimal. It's not,
It's not gonna run the whole school.
Not running the
by
whole
any means,
school,
But
right.
it will run our shelter area.
and I appreciate that, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that we're fortunate that we have not had anything, catastrophic that would require a shelter to hold 1,000 people. But to think that we're gonna go and we're gonna support a shelter that at its best day is gonna shelter 75 people, when we could have Mountain View that could shelter potentially 1,000 or more, short-sighted, so.
But
Just one question before. Chief, a while back, Mountain View Middle School was used as a shelter.
Correct.
What's transpired between then and now that it's not? Because I know that they do have a generator. I don't know if they had a different generator at one time, but I know in the past that Mountain View was designated as a shelter, and there were people that stayed there.
It still is our shelter. One of the concerns we have is one point of entry into Mountain View. And this last storm we had live wires across Lauren Lane. That was shut down for us as a shelter. We could not use it.
I believe Medville is also one point of entry, technically two, but
Two,
that's not exactly the best,
but again, and with the down generator in addition to that road, it was not usable. It was a shelter that was non-existent for us. We had to look elsewhere, i.e. regional shelters. So with this backup plan, if you will, at Medford Farms or Village of Glen Falls, that we install it there, and we can at least put some people there. And most of the time that we're sheltering people isn't a large amount.
and I'll throw this out, if Medville were to come up with the match, would the board support the grant? It wouldn't be any tax dollars from the town. We would still be open to applying for HMEP money for the schools. Again, we have to come up with the 50-50 match. So would there be an objection to sponsoring the grant for them if they came up with the match money?
Just a question that then going back to where Selectman Gross was talking about, if, one, we didn't know that there was, it sounds like we didn't know there was available funding for grant money to do generators, would that put in question if we wanted to go forward with one of the, with Mountain View or with the high school, would they look at that, hey, we've already given this community grant money for one generator?
This is the
I'm
same.
just asking that question.
This is the same grant funding that we have our radios.
Right.
We got our emergency generator at the police department, our fire radios
So-
last year.
So we could actually, so you're saying they could go forward with
We
that?
could go forward with
And
it as
it
well.
wouldn't, and if we said, hey, we wanted to go forward also, we would have that same, that same opportunity?
Yes.
And just out of curiosity, I'm gonna ask the question then, when the other generators and people spoke about them the last couple of times that they were getting old and were doing repairs,
Why wouldn't we be?
why weren't we doing that?
Probably because the radios we were going after, right?
Typically, it's because it's a 50-50 match. It's different when you're purchasing a 6,000 kilowatt generator for a clubhouse
Okay.
versus a $60,000 generator for a school or
And that was the
higher.
question that came up?
We have to come up with the match. And we could pursue all the grants we
So you're
want.
saying that those grants could be pursued, but we chose not to, and you're saying this is just a smaller one, thus the cost is less, and
I don't know if we chose not to. I think this, I'll not speak for the school district, but I think they would be the ones going after the
Steve, just so
grants.
you know, we did get that grant here to put the
Right, and
emergency
then
generator here as a
The one at the
backup.
PD as well.
I,
Scott?
I would say, though, that, you know, I think, Chief, I think that is not a school issue. That is a town and a school issue. We use the school, but they're not, I've been on the school board. They're not thinking about Mountain View and the high school being an emergency shelter and applying for grants. They simply aren't. The leadership has to come from us, from within. And it goes back to this whole other issue. Should public funds be used to support a private entity? And I wasn't, you know, when you read through the letter, you know, it's, part of the problems in this community is that they have, and to quote, crushing financial commitment to the bank. And, you know, it pains me that these folks have this financial issue. But then again, our board has also endorsed $100,000 plus grant for a replacement of leach fields, I believe, right? Was it $300,000? How much was that?
The CDBG grant?
Community block
So-
development
Okay,
grant.
so that also was federal funds that went to a private group, private individuals, so that they could replace leach fields. I don't know how many of you who've had to replace a septic system, did you get federal funds to do that? So, I'm having a problem with this. And in an era right now when we're talking about taxes, you know, I just think that if we're gonna accept federal funds or state funds for emergency management, it should be for the entire community, not one small percentage of it. Especially when, if God forbid, we have something that is, you know, more catastrophic in nature, I would feel much more comfortable putting those resources into a Mountain View or the high school that could shelter 1,000 people, not can shelter, you know, 50 or 75.
Yeah, I have a question, and I don't know if the chief, you can answer this. I mean, Selectman Gross's question is, I think it's a legitimate question, is how do you take federal money and purchase a generator in a private entity? I mean, does it qualify?
Yes, because it's going to be used as emergency management shelter. So it will be not just open to Medville, it will be open to the town of Goffstown.
That's not what their letter, though,
No.
to the board said. It said it was for their community members.
Right, see, that's not, and I think that we may have started the discussion before you came in, and that's not what's in here, but that's one of the things that was brought up. And I don't even know if they are aware of it, so.
After our meeting with Senator D'Alessandro, I questioned that very same thing with our rep from Emergency Management. And he assured me that it does qualify because they are a nonprofit. It's not an individual, it is the association. And they are a qualifying entity to receive federal funding. My concern at the time was, okay, if we just do this and we don't require something such as an MOU, what's to stop any other association from saying, well, we have a clubhouse and we want a generator? But I think by requiring it to be certified as a shelter, requiring it that it be opened in times of emergency, not to just Medville. I mean, we may have a need for any numbers of shelters for any numbers of days, and we don't want to close the school down. Maybe school's in session, and we don't want to take the gym away from the school or whatever rooms we want. It's just an added resource for us to have that ability. We may have something very isolated at the meeting house or anywhere where we need to move for a week or two some individuals to a shelter, and by this MOU, they will be required to allow us to use it. So it's not just a carte blanche, here you go, have a generator.
Do they know this?
I'm saying that that would be our condition to go forward with this.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the basic question comes down, does Medville Cooperative Board of Directors realize that if this goes forward and they do get this generator, that they are part of the emergency management facility? I don't think that they,
That's not how it was presented
right,
in here.
I don't think
That's
that.
not how it's written. It said, their
Right,
quote was, "The discussion centered on funding of a generator to make the village clubhouse a dependable shelter for our members in times of crisis." It didn't say the community,
right, Nick?
so,
And I agree with you, but I think that's where we now come
Right.
forward and say, the Board of Selectmen had a discussion, and yes, they would be willing to go forward with this on these conditions. We are not willing to just give you a generator, but we have a need for a shelter. This would be the condition, would have to be certified as a shelter, you would have to sign an MOU. These are all the conditions that we would apply, and that's why I even said we don't forgive the fees. I think we collect the fees, we put up the match, and the generator belongs to the town of Goffstown.
Just,
Yep.
Steve.
And just a question, because my understanding, if I'm reading this correctly, is that they're looking for an exemption on the inspections of the tanks, which is they feel is gonna be around $1,500. They say they're gonna take the $1,500, and this money will be used exclusively for the generator, redoing a bathroom, and making wheelchair ramps. I guess, I look at $1,500, I don't even know how I can do the bathroom and the ramp myself personally. I have no idea so, I guess my next question is going to be, on this grant for the generator, what was the amount that they were looking for, and is it really gonna be, I mean, can they really get a bathroom, an ADA bathroom, and a wheelchair and a generator for $1,500? Does that
I
sound?
don't have those numbers, I don't know.
I have no idea, I mean, there must be something else involved here.
okay. I think we all take our jobs pretty seriously. One of our jobs is we're gonna make an investment into this clubhouse or building. And I'm gonna quote from there, I'm gonna read one paragraph, so please give me that opportunity. 75% of our revenues goes to pay our crushing financial commitment to the bank, plus 10% held in reserve by the bank as reserved against default on our loan, leaving us little money to fund the many infrastructure maintenance projects, including the underground tanks removal, which we were led to believe would be funded by state grants that evaporated, leaving Medville burdened with the replacement of underground storage tanks at a cost of $2,567.85 each tank. 30-plus tanks are scheduled this year at a cost of $80,000. We know that almost every single leach field in that facility was compromised, and there were federal grants that went to replace some of them. If we have a fiduciary responsibility to our entire community to make sure that if we do invest in something, that we're doing it with an entity that we believe has the financial wherewithal to sustain itself. I do not feel that comfortable proceeding in this direction, because from their own letter to us, they're telling us that that they have financial issues, that they have underground storage tank problems. We know that they have at least 2 to 3, if not more, leach fields that are gone that need to get replaced. They don't have that much money. So then we're gonna take our chance on this to make this an emergency shelter, and as Selectman Fournier said, they're gonna make this ADA compliant, we're gonna have everything up and running, when we know that they have a lot of issues before them, you know, and then that's not to mention the fact that people who are upside down and they're walking away from their properties down there, leaving a shell of a home, and there's no equity in it, and we have those issues. So guys, I just don't, as much as I feel for the financial position that these folks are in, we have an obligation to the entire Goffstown community.
Okay, can I make a suggestion? Okay? I'm assuming, I don't see anything that's pressing that we have to make a decision on this tonight. Am I correct? And a notice up here in the second, in the very beginning of this letter, it says that, Police Captain Mike Sullivan representing Chief Pat Sullivan, who was on vacation. So the chief was not there. In lieu of the fact that the letter is written by Ed Neville, who is our prior building inspector, Ed is a knowledgeable person. Can I suggest that police chief, who is our emergency management director, go down and meet with Ed Neville? The chief has been here, he's heard all of our concerns that we have. Have that discussion, and number one, make sure that they are aware that this would be a public facility, not just for them. Take a look at, assess the clubhouse that this is gonna be. Check indeed how many means of egress there are to the facility. I mean, the issue that's come up is I see a very valid one, because we have those high-tension power lines that kinda go through this area that are not far from the clubhouse. And it's very possible there might be two means of egress, but they might be, both of them might go underneath those power lines. So if he could assess that and the other concerns, and the sentence, the paragraph that Selectman Fournier brought up begins, we realized we needed to make improvements to make the village clubhouse a dependable shelter. And, with that, to see what's there, and just kinda, report back to us, perhaps, to see what the viability of this is, and just so that we have our concerns addressed.
I think with all due respect to your opinion, no matter what, the police chief has a conversation with them. I don't think that this is a good thing for us to do. I really don't. I think that an emergency shelter needs to be in a public building that's publicly inspected all the time, that's large enough to sustain or to serve any purpose. I don't think even if they said that it's open to the entire community and we'll make it ADA compliant, I still wouldn't vote for it. So that's just me, and I don't know if there's three other people who feel the same way, then we're wasting the chief's time.
No, I understand I completely agree with you, okay? But there's one other thing that I see here that was not brought up here, okay? And a concern that I have is that this is a concentrated area. And when I say concentrated area, this Village of Glen Falls and Medfield Farms has a higher amount of people who have certain types of needs. Some people who are on oxygen or medical emergency type, that if they were without power, that in that one area, we would have a higher amount. And if they don't have the generator, and I agree with the issues, I mean, this is the tough part of what we have to deal with. Because when we go into an emergency situation, and they're without power, as you brought up, I mean, I was there with you when food was brought in there, the issues that were in there. You have people that have health issues and concerns, and without the generator there, okay, if they're without power, that's still, no matter how you look at it, they do put a burden on the emergency management in one way or another. And one way to look at this, and I'm not saying, this is another way to look at this, is by providing that emergency generator in there and making sure that that can meet the needs of some other people in the community outside of the Medfield community. But within the Goffstown community, that could provide for another person who was on oxygen or had some specific type of needs that could be there and feel comfortable in that environment. That's also a benefit to the community. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, and I'm not.
Like I said, I just think that the bathrooms are inadequate, the kitchen facility is inadequate. You have to have, if you're gonna have a shelter for 50 people, they have like 2 bathrooms there. I don't get it.
I understand, and I guess I'm just looking at it that, knowing Ed Neville, and who he was, and I think the chief can express those concerns of the board to him, and I think that Ed would fully understand, because he's aware of life safety issues.
I had one more question. I know that you've put in a generator to your house, et cetera. I'm just curious. If there was another event such as this one, wouldn't it be Medville or the Village of Glens Falls' responsibility that maybe they have a transfer switch to their clubhouse, and maybe they have an arrangement that in the event of that, a generator is brought down for them at their cost, and it's plugged in, started up, and off they go, or they buy a standby generator. I don't understand why it's our responsibility to do this. Should we do the same thing for the meeting house? There's a lot of people who, they have a lot of needs there too. Should we do the same thing for the assisted living folks down the road, or should we do it for Bel Air Nursing Home?
Well, I guess,
That's a good point.
I just
no,
don't
you
know.
do,
I
but
mean,
I guess
wanna have a
what I
chance there,
heard,
too.
what I heard, okay, from Selectman Capasano, was that because I asked the question, how do they meet the qualifications? What I heard was that they do because they are a nonprofit. They meet those. Now, if any of those other entities meet that qualification, I don't see how you could, why they would be different. I understand, and I found over the years that there's many times, of even sometimes when something comes in for a tax exemption, and you look at something and you find out that by statute, they're allowed a tax exemption. If they qualify, and all the parties that are involved that are giving out this federal dollars, if they all know what that the entity is and they say that they qualify, it's not for us to determine who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. We play by the rules, and those are the rules. We don't create the rules. I perfectly understand where you're coming from,
Mr.
Dave.
Chair, I remain opposed to this. I want to stand away from this one, arm's length and more. I feel we're not going to take a vote on this one way or the other tonight, so they're welcome to come back with more information and to make a stronger argument.
He's first.
I know that.
Sorry.
And I also would like fire department back here to see if they have any leeway with the wording of their inspection requirements, that if 4, 5, 10 tanks were all ready for inspection side by side, all different, could that be handled under one inspection fee rather than separate fees, if there's any leeway within that inspection criteria? So that's a question for the fire department to come back and help. But I'm not ready to vote for this one tonight.
I just want to put it into perspective. I don't think there's anyone that's saying the town is obligated to do something like this. I think what happened is the community down in Medville looked at what happened to them in the last emergency. They got together and they said, how do we avoid this in the future? They then started doing their research, and they found out that there is the availability of these emergency hazardous mitigation emergency planning grants. They met with the state representative who told them that they qualify, but that the town would have to do the actual grant. They also were told that they would have to come up with the match. Then, in looking at their finances, they came up with a potential solution that they saw. So I think it was just a research on their part, thinking out of the box, trying to come up with a way of solving their issue, at the same time recognizing that if they became self-sufficient, as Chairman Devanza said, it takes the pressure off of our police and fire resources. When I looked at this, I said, all right, how do we take this and truly make it into a town asset versus just saying, okay, here's a generator. And I think that's why I would support this, because I think it's a win-win. It gives us the ability to use this building as a shelter when it doesn't affect Medville, and if there is a region-wide emergency that affects Medville, that's one population we don't need to deal with, because they are now self-sufficient.
Is this common in the city for anything like this?
It is common for us to identify shelters that are not public buildings, and we do enter into agreements. But typically, those buildings don't have their own population. They're typically Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA buildings that
There's
we
one
can
right next
utilize.
door, believe it or not, yeah.
Before, I guess my comment, before we give it to the chief, I mean, we might wanna just, I'm not looking for people's count, but I'm ready to, I don't think I need any more additional information or waiting for what would come back, even if I was, because I would look at it all. I think I understand what I'm looking at, and I'm prepared. I don't know if we wanna go forward and see if we wanna make a vote, or if we wanna have the chief do the extra time and work for information. I'm prepared tonight, though.
I am too.
Anyone else?
You know what?
Maybe
We'll
just
take a
straw
vote,
poll.
and that'll be that. I'll make a motion to decline Medville's request.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Okay,
Do you want to stop my report here and go to, we had a public hearing scheduled at 7?
well, we are gonna stop your report, and we were gonna go to the public
Okay.
hearing for 7 o'clock. Actually, I'll let the discussion go a little bit further, because I was hoping to see some more people in the audience for the public hearing. You're a presenter. So, with that, 7 o'clock, we have a public hearing scheduled. It's regarding amending poll licenses, and if you'd like to come up, our assessor, Scott Bartlett, is here. And the public hearing that we are having tonight is to hear public comment on the petition brought before the Board of Selectmen by the Town Assessor, Scott Bartlett. The petition requests that the Board of Selectmen hold a duly noticed hearing and issue an order that states that all outstanding poll licenses issued by or under the authority of the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Goffstown or their predecessors in office acting under the provisions of RSA 231:161B or its predecessor statutes are hereby changed to incorporate in each such poll license in effect as of April 1st, 2011, and effective as of such date, the following statement. In accordance with the requirements of RSA 72:23, Roman numeral I, B, the licenses, and any other entity now or hereafter using or occupying municipal property pursuant to this license shall be responsible for the payment of and shall pay all properly assessed personal and real property taxes no later than the due date. Failure to pay duly assessed personal and real property taxes when due shall be cause to terminate this license. Further, all users of the public right-of-way, both current and future, that are authorized to use the public right-of-way under RSA 231 and who are not otherwise exempt from taxation under RSA 72 shall be subject to the above statement. Any poll licenses issued subsequent to April 1st, 2011 will include the above statement. And just for the record, is this a notice publicly in
Yes.
Newspaper? And,
Newspaper was not required.
excuse me?
Newspaper was not required.
Okay, so the only requirement for this public hearing is the notice that's posted as a regular meeting, and that this public hearing was gonna be here, because this was posted outside. Okay.
It's posted.
With that, I'll open it up to our assessor, Scott Bartlett.
I just wanted to let you know, in addition to the public notice that was posted, I did send out to all properties that I knew of that occupy the public right-of-way, whether they are, I expect them to be taxable or exempt. And I'll just read that list to you very quickly. Fairpoint Communications, Northern New England Telephone Operations, Public Service Company of New Hampshire, Energy North Gas Company, Comcast Cable, Goffstown Village Water Precinct, Grassmere Village Water Precinct, Manchester Waterworks, Goffstown Sewer Department, Goffstown Fire Department, Goffstown Police Department, and the Goffstown Department of Public Works. A copy of the notice was sent to each of these so that there would be an understanding of what we were doing today.
Okay.
I do have a prepared statement I just want to read real quick, and then any questions I'd be glad to answer. RSA 72:23 Roman numeral 1B states, "All leases and other agreements, the terms of which provide for the use or occupation by others of real or personal property owned by the state or a city, town, school district, or village district entered into after July 1st, 1979, shall provide for the payment of properly assessed real and personal property taxes by the party using or occupying said property no later than the due date." In other words, non-exempt entities using any public property shall pay property taxes. From 1999 to 2007, there were 3 Supreme Court decisions involving the City of Rochester, Verizon New England Incorporated, and the use of the city's public right-of-way. Verizon number 2, as it's called, this was the second Verizon decision, which was issued in June of 2004, states, "It is clear that when a city's land is used or occupied by someone other than the city, the lease or agreement between the city and the user or occupier must include a provision requiring the user or occupier to pay real estate taxes." The town has agreements in the form of poll licenses with electric and telecommunication companies. It also has a franchise agreement with the cable company and an assumed agreement with the gas company for the use and occupation of the public right-of-way. All 3 Verizon decisions clearly indicate that these non-exempt entities using the public right-of-way shall pay property taxes. My petition to the board, which was earlier read, dated February 21st, requests that the board change the poll license agreements and any other agreements, including franchise agreements and any assumed agreements that we may have, for the use of the public right-of-way to include a provision for the user to pay properly assessed property taxes. And it is the request that this change would be effective as of April 1st, 2011.
Question?
You rattled off a list, and namely, you rattled off a list of the water precincts.
That's exactly what I was just thinking.
Would that be equivalent? No. So you're saying that because they occupy space in the town's right-of-way, they would be taxed for their water mains, or no?
No,
What would they be taxed on?
they won't be taxed for anything.
Anything?
I sent out a courtesy notice to anybody that occupies the public right-of-way,
Right.
just so there'd be no confusion, because I will be valuing, and I will be putting an assessment on every single one of these entities.
Okay.
When I value the public right-of-way, I'm going to value the entire thing. And then I'm going to determine which entities have a portion of that, and I will assign a value to each of them. Just because they're on this list does not mean I will then send them a tax bill. They will be, the majority, well, not the majority, a little over half are actually exempt, but there will be a property tax, a property record card, which has a value on it, but it will have an exempt code, the same as Town Hall. There's a property record card for Town Hall.
Well, they're exempt, I mean, I guess I can understand the DPW and the fire department and the police department, but the water precincts, my question would be that they are not owned by the town, they're owned by the precinct. Are they, but you said that they were exempt. Why are they exempt and not some others?
They are a precinct of the town, and as such, they are exempt from taxation under RSA 7223(1)A. And if you read that statute, you'll find that any water companies, most water companies are owned by a precinct, but they are exempt from taxation.
Okay.
So a private water company would be taxable for their water mains, but we don't have any private water companies in town.
My other question, if I may. You said, in your beginning statement, you mentioned, obviously, we're the town of Goffstown.
Mhm.
What about public utilities that are at Goffstown High School, because they have power lines going through them? What about Mountain View Middle School, Bartlett Elementary, Glen Lake School? Is the school district allowed to tax or not?
No.
And also, we cannot tax on their behalf, correct?
No, we cannot.
Okay,
However-
so basically so if there are poles in the town's right of way, we can have a poll tax, but if those poles extend onto a public school, which is a separate subsidiary or separate school district, then they are free from taxation.
you're getting into an area that, it would be very difficult to determine. Because right now, all of your utilities, they have rights of way across public land.
Right.
They have rights of way across, private land.
Yeah.
Am I valuing every one of those and recommending that we do? No, I'm not. Right now, all I'm doing is saying, okay, I can identify the public right-of-ways. All right? Through the DPW, I have a list of the miles of road that we have. So I can clearly identify that. This is an issue I haven't actually thought about, and as you bring it up, I'm like, it's kind of running around in my head right now. It's like, you know, what are we gonna do with this one? I would say nothing. First of all, I don't think there's enough value to take into consideration there, because again, usually we're talking fairly short runs from the public right-of-way to the,
And the high school is one that has substantial power lines that cross through it.
okay, right now I am valuing if there's a transmission,
There's a transmission line that goes
there's
through
a
the back of the high school.
transmission right-of-way that runs across anybody's land. I am
Right.
currently valuing that.
Okay.
I am not valuing the distribution right-of-way for the access from the public
you.
right-of-way.
Yes.
That I am not valuing,
Gotcha.
okay? Transmission lines, we do have a number that run through this
All right.
town.
So I'm thinking the only one that probably would apply would be the high school.
I mean, if you look at the map that shows our our transmission rights-of-way, it looks like a wheel spoke. All of those transmission right-of-ways are currently being valued as part of either, there's 3 entities that own and utilize those.
One more question.
One more question.
I'm sorry. What is we have a bill in the House right now, right, that could make all this a moot point, or no?
No, the bill that's in the House deals with the poles themselves,
Poles, can you elaborate on that?
the actual pole.
Poles, oh, I'm sorry.
The telephone pole.
Right.
Right now, if you see a telephone pole on the road, if it's owned by Public Service of New Hampshire, the electric company, that electric pole is taxable. If it's owned by Fairpoint Communications, who's a telecommunications company, it's not taxable. Same
Okay.
okay. Now, that bill is currently before them. It passed the Senate. It's currently gonna be
Past
voted on.
committee in the House.
Passed the committee at the House. I don't know what's gonna happen on the floor on that one. That is a different issue than what we're dealing
Okay.
with today.
You all set? You? Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I did have one issue that I just want to mention.
Wait, no, on this. We're still on this.
On this.
because-
On this.
Okay, because I officially want to ask if there's any members of the
Oh.
public that want to ask a question or make a comment to this.
Okay. I did have one issue on the wording here that I want to bring up as a potential issue.
Okay.
Okay? On the wording that I had proposed to put on our poll licenses, the last sentence states, "Failure to pay duly assessed personal and real property taxes when due shall be cause to terminate this license." This entire petition, I did run by our attorney, Attorney Drescher. He did approve this. He had no issue with it. Since speaking with him, I've heard from a couple of assessors that this last sentence may not be, may be illegal, because the statute grants public utilities the right to use the public right-of-way. And I don't know if we have that right. So
Put the
if
word
the
may.
board chooses to agree to this, I would ask that they do it on the condition that we ask Bill Drescher to review this last sentence again and advise the board of whether it should stay or be removed. That's the only thing I had to say.
May I?
Go right ahead.
What would happen if you terminated a license?
Probably nothing.
You wouldn't get HBO?
It's kind of,
They already know my address.
that's the problem, it's kind of a moot point,
Yeah.
because they're in the public right-of-way. You can't require them to remove their poles and their wires. So that's why this was brought up. This is wording that has been used, it was used by Rochester. I used it in Seabrook when I petitioned the Board of Selectmen in Seabrook, but it has recently been brought up that this particular sentence may be an issue. So I would ask if that, you do want to approve this, that we ask,
Conditioned on.
condition upon that.
So if the license was terminated, then we would negotiate a new license, maybe with different terms. The infrastructure would still be there.
One of the problems, if you terminate it, then you might also exhaust any of your ability to collect the revenue, because they'll say it's been terminated.
One thing we might do is replace the word shall with may,
May,
and then that
right.
may solve
That's
the
what I
whole
was thinking.
problem. Nick, you?
Or I was gonna suggest maybe a severability clause, something that says if any part of this is found to be illegal, it doesn't negate the entire.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, because laws are always changing.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Again, any members of the public who want to make a comment? Seeing no members of the public who want to make a comment? Any other issues from the board?
So you're closing the public hearing?
Well, I
at
just want to make sure, yeah, and no other questions,
say.
I'll close the public hearing at 7:39. Okay, now, do we need a motion on this, or do we have to wait? Do we want to wait till we have the final?
You need this for April 1st?
I would like this to be effective April 1st. I don't believe it technically has to be passed today, but I think it would make everything cleaner if it was.
Okay, so if we had a motion.
Contingent motion.
Yeah.
Make a motion to accept the assessor's recommendation with regard to the poll licenses, to include Attorney Drescher's review of the last sentence to make sure that's compliant, and the possibility of inserting a severability clause.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Okay,
If I could.
go right ahead.
Scott, I just wanted to say that every time you come before us, you're always like very well prepared, and, you know, everything is really, you know, sometimes you need to hear good news, and always very pleased when you come here. It's very, very thorough and on point, so.
Could I add to that?
Sure.
We also, in our signature folder, had a large pile of abatements, and there was a lot of work there, and
Really good work.
yes, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
The only thing is, if you can give us a stamp so we don't have to.
This one.
Thank you.
I had to sign every single one of them.
Thanks. Okay, getting back to where we were, let's see. Back to the town administrator's report, where we left off after,
Assessor recommendation.
That's the recommendations.
there you go.
Great segue.
I had some questions on those. Is he gone? No.
Do you really?
No, I'm only kidding.
The assessor recommends abatements for map 38, lot 117, map 8, lot 46-6, map 9, lot 36-2-3, map 8, lot 46-16-4, and map 8, lot 62-7. He does not recommend abatements on map 5, lot 69-1, map 5, lot 62I. He recommends elderly exemption for map 34, lot 135. He does not recommend elderly exemptions on map 6, lot 37-89. He recommends veterans tax credits in map 12, lot 23-1, map 9, lot 440. He recommends report of timber cut, map 6, lot 63-1, and a tax deferral lien application corrected for map 32, lot 26E44.
Motion to accept the assessor's recommendations.
Second.
second by, any discussion?
One, on the last one, tax deferral lien application, we don't see those that often, but there's a portion of it that says what percentage of it is equity in the home. Can we know, I don't mind that it's left blank, but when it goes over 50%, could it be filled in or something?
Law
so that-
allows 80%.
80%, I know that, I'm just saying, to start to trigger it for us.
Yeah.
Because I think that one was a lot less than that, but.
So you want to see how much,
When it's over, yes,
okay.
because what happens is that we say 80, but the way that the market has been going lately, you know,
And it's of the assessed value.
right.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. At a previous meeting, the board awarded bids to various contractors for the Grassmere Town Hall project. Now we are ready to proceed with signing contracts with these vendors. It would be helpful if the board could either authorize the chairman or the town administrator to sign these as they come due.
So make a motion to authorize either the chair or the town administrator to sign the contracts regarding the Grassmere Town Hall renovations.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. The Historic District Commission is seeking the Board of Selectmen's authorization to apply for Council of the Arts grant in the amount of, and that needs to change, that was a total project cost, but it's $14,800 is the grant for the stenciling of the walls of the Grassmere Town Hall. Absent this grant, we would be using funds from our Grassmere Town Hall Restoration Fund for this purpose.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes?
Just a quick question. If there was a match, would that be coming from the restoration fund?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you. And just a few things on future agenda items. The cemetery trustees will be in on April 11th regarding the expansion of West Lawn, the plan for this year, and the use of the lot on the corner of Parsons Drive in North Mass. Regarding that lot, they said they thought that was done and they had no problems with it. But regarding the deed issue brought up, they do see a future use of it. It may not be in the immediate future, might be 25, 50 years down the road, but they do see future use as a cemetery, but as probably an above-ground mausoleum.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't research the deed piece since they have a future use. Also in April, Chief Sullivan will be here to present an amended ordinance for Glen Lake parking. And also we will be reviewing town leases, which includes Mary Lou, SAU 19, the White Building, the track, and GTV. The track is out of lease right now. That expired on December 31st, 2010.
Is everybody aware of it or not?
Yes.
Okay.
We're allowed to do 2-year leases now?
We're allowed to do up to 5-year
Up
leases.
to 5, okay.
So I've been in contact with the superintendent of schools. I think she and I had talked last year before Dave left, and we were agreeable to a 2-year lease at that time, but we never, I think with Dave leaving, it, just fell through the cracks. So we're drafting up something and try to work it out and bring it before the board and then their board.
If I could, again, I don't want to open up Pandora's box here, but I might as well. The SAU building is it's 3 school districts that pay into the SAU, and I know that there's provisions where they're responsible for the upkeep of the roof and all those other things. But right now, I believe it's $1.
Yes, it's a 100-year lease,
For
Right.
$1?
99. Is it a 99-year lease?
Dollar?
something like that.
You heard me
It's a
correctly.
long-term lease.
And I guess what I'm driving at is that if that was on the free market, I would venture to say that that would probably be about a $3,000 a month, if not more, rent on that facility. And I'm just, we can have somebody appraised to see what
Doesn't
that
matter,
is.
Well,
it's
we have a
under lease
100-year
for
lease.
99 years.
99-year lease.
I'd just like, just to continue if I could. It's a lease between the school board and this town. If both parties agree to break that agreement, then you can break the agreement.
I'd have to read the lease to see if there's
If
a
it's
clause in there
possible.
for that.
The reason why I say that is that 30% of everything that goes into the SAU is paid for by 2 other communities. I do not know why we've entered into an agreement where we pay $1, and although that there is some maintenance and upkeep, 2 other towns pay 33 cents a year, and then they also pay for the improvements and the heat and all those other things, don't get me wrong. But there's an opportunity here for the town of Goffstown to recoup money for the services of the SAU, which in my opinion are for 3 towns, not just for 1. And I think we should explore that.
Well, I'll just respond to some of the philosophy that was shared by the Board of Selectmen and the school board at the time that this lease was entered into. the philosophy was that regardless of which pocket you take the taxes out, it's still the same person, the same taxpayer. It's just a different pocket that it's coming out of. So, to try to keep the cost down, I mean, the town could have charged a larger fee coming into the town, but recognizing that it's still the same taxpayer. Like I said, just a different pocket.
That's not,
But you have to understand one other thing that goes with this, you know. And it's a concern that I share. Maybe I'm the only person that shares this concern today, okay? But we have two districts, two other towns that are entered into this agreement. And I don't think you're talking a terribly substantial amount of money, okay? And one of those towns that's in our SAU also borders another town that just pulled out of another town and built their own system. And I have a concern that by looking at something in that regard and getting to the point where in that town's perspective, they might feel that they're being nickeled and dimed to death. Now, we could have the discussion as to how much is a nickel and how much is a dime, but not going into that. Get them to the point where they get to the point and they say, you know something? We have on the other side of us another town that we could possibly have into an agreement. And that other town now that all of a sudden finds themselves, you know, we had this great idea that if we pulled out of that district and we paid X amount of dollars to that community, and we had our own district, and we had our own school system, that we would be better off. But you know something? Times are tough right now. And if we have this town right next door to us, and what can we do to entice that town to get out of the contract that it has with another town on its other border to come into us? I don't want to be in a position that we lose that.
My other question is, I don't know, the SAU is responsible for all maintenance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Roof, you name it, paint, everything, right? Parking lot, or, no, not?
You'd have to look at it to see. The parking lot is a
Probably,
public parking lot. We provide them with, I don't know, so many designated spaces, I believe. I don't know that technical, if we repave it, do we charge them a certain amount? Again, it goes into that thing, you know, it doesn't matter which pocket we take it out of, it's still the taxpayer.
All right. I'm good.
Thank you.
That's all I had for public.
That's all you have for public? Okay. Next item then is Selectmen's discussion, I believe. We did public hearing, Fire Chief, okay. New business, appointment of vice chair, adopt rules of procedure, committee assignments, and goal development process. As far as the appointment of vice chairman, I'd like to announce that I have offered that to Selectman Campusano, who has graciously accepted that. Am I correct?
Thank you.
Thank you. Rules of procedure that we have, anybody have any concerns with them, or
I had one.
what's that?
And it was under the Conservation Commission.
I don't know if I have them.
I just have to
It's not, it was in
Yeah.
last week's packet.
It was in there, I thought it was.
Or
Hold on, Nick, if you could just
the
bear
14th.
with us. Which week was it?
14th. The 14th. Actually, wasn't this a handout to them?
It was a separate handout.
Oh, it was the 14th?
Separate handout.
It
on
was
the
in your
14th.
mail basket on the 14th.
No, I would have got it to you, Phil. I can go check your box if
It
you like.
was on page, no, it was actually 3.1.1, representatives as appointed to the following. And
Three.
under Conservation Commission, it lists us as an alternate member, voting member when acting as an alternate. But I'm just wondering the numbers. They already have 7 regular members and 3 alternates, not including us. So how do we act as an alternate? And their actual bylaws say that we serve as a representative in advisory capacity.
Right, that, Vivian was on the board when that change was made, I remember, and she recommended that change. So we're not a voting member on that board.
Not according to their bylaws.
Right.
So,
What about the statute on the Conservation Commission? Does the statute?
Well, that overrides anything that you have, so. We can come back to that.
Yeah.
perhaps, yeah.
so I just wanted to point that out.
Well, okay, so we can just hold off on them until we have
Yep.
this resolved, okay? Fine. Next item then was committee assignments, okay? As far as committee assignments, what we will have is basically what we've had. The main change is going to be, obviously, I will have administration. Selectman Gross will have Parks and Rec. And Selectman Fournier will have library. That's the basic outside of common oversight. I'll go through it. Budget Committee will be Scott. CIP will be Nick. Common Oversight will be Phil. Conservation Commission will be Nick. Economic Development will be Steve. Highway Safety will be David. Historic District will be Phil. Joint Loss Management will be Nick. Library Trustees will be Steve. Parks and Rec will be Scott. Planning Board will be myself. Sewer Commission will be David. Solid Waste will be David. 250th will be Scott. Administration will be Phil. Fire will be Nick. Library will be Steve. Parks and Rec will be Scott. Police will be Phil. And Public Works will be Dave. I think I covered it all. If there's any questions,
Yeah, I was just gonna, just on those sheets, it's the Budget Committee is now gonna be the second Wednesday of every month.
that's gonna be the second
Yeah,
Wednesday?
they changed it.
Okay. Okay.
It was the third Tuesday.
What?
It was.
It used to be the third Tuesday, now it's the second Wednesday. Something to do with American Idol or something, I don't really know.
Oh, really?
No, I'm only sorry.
I thought maybe it had something to do with the other one there. The Donalds,
The Apprentice?
yeah,
Sunday
That's
night.
Sunday night.
okay.
Wow.
Well, we watch the show, so.
We do too, and that's why I'm always tired of Mondays.
Okay.
Drives that have to go to 11.
I
Yes.
apologize for a second.
Sure.
I just wanted, if we could just step back regarding the conversation that Selectman Gross was speaking about the SAU, and I'm not saying we do anything with it, but I just wanted to make a note that it appears that every time we are doing something with another town, be it was dispatch, be it our SAU buildings, we give these discounts, or there's no fees to it, and then we worry after if they will pull out. And then, also we could talk a lot about mutual aid and, and resources. And we worry about the pullout, and then we had that other situation where they actually did pull out dispatch. I would caution us, and as we go forward, at any time that we involve ourselves with other communities, that for some reason we seem, from what I see at this point, we always receive the short end of the stick. And then we're also left with the liability that because we've planned around that, for those capacities, when they do pull out, we're running around, or we're in fear of that we'll lose them. And I just wanted to bring that up, that, you know, that seems to have been the case every time we've dealt with any of these other municipalities. I just wanted to bring that up. I agree that, you know, maybe this is not the one you go forward with, but it seems every time we're involved with these, with other communities, they will leave us quickly for when they find something better, but yet, when we do have them here, they're not, you know, we seem to be paying more than our share, and we end up with the liabilities of that, that's all.
I was just gonna, just caution that sometimes when you paint the issue with a broad brush, you kind of mix things together. When you're talking about relatively, when you're talking budget, relatively small items, that's one thing, but the potential for a particular community to pull students and associated tuitions out, that ends up being a huge amount. I don't think they're the same issue to,
I'm not.
it's not apples to apples.
I'm not debating that, I'm just saying that when we go into these negotiations, in other words, if it's 30% of the population, I mean, of that student, why wouldn't they be not paying the full 30% of those pieces? That's all I'm saying. I mean, why is it that this community should bear a larger brunt? And we might say, in this case, let's just say if it came up to be $10,000 or $20,000 a year, I'm just gonna throw that out there, okay? I mean, when you add that up over each year, and we talk about how revenues are going down, and our operations
I'll
going
go
further,
there,
I
I
mean,
got it.
it's all over. I mean,
I think, if I could,
we did the
I
same
think
thing
Phil
in
made a
dispatch.
very compelling argument. That's why I dropped it, because we are no different than any market for any product. And if you can get the gasoline cheaper at this gas station as opposed to that gas station, you're gonna go change your business. And if there are other communities that can provide educational services for a less expensive price, or to get a better quality at the same price, unfortunately, it is a market. And I think you made a good point, you convinced me, so, and I think, that doesn't mean we can't look at it, Steve, but I just think that we're in the process of providing services and getting services. We're no different than when it comes to, you know, we would like things from Manchester sometimes, because they're a bigger city, and sometimes the smaller towns want stuff from us, and,
Well, I think, you might have misunderstood me. I'm just saying cautioning as we go forward.
yeah.
I mean, we did this with the same thing with the expansion of dispatch, and what happened with, you know, in other words, and even then, one would say that, you know, was the cost of that dispatch were they really paying that share? That's all I'm saying, is that as we go forward, that's all I was just.
And I think the board was cautious when it had a request from a neighboring town for household hazardous waste.
Yeah, I'm just, okay.
Right, and one other thing, you know, when you go back and you look at that moment in time, you could take it as a comparison. If all of a sudden this board was faced with the prospect of having a piece of property in this kind of an economy, and what do we do with this piece of property, okay? Do we manage the expenses of this piece of property that we don't have in our budget, that we're gonna have to take from someplace else? Or is it in our best interest to enter into a lease for $1 and let them handle the expense? And we don't have it, so.
It's kind of the same argument we were talking about with the property for field space, that maybe we're gonna have private entities do it too, so that we don't have to pay for it. So it's the same rationale. Good point.
Okay, thank you. Goal development process that we have. The last time that we had this goal development process, I believe we went through the goals that we had. We went through them and crossed off the ones that we accomplished, and I think we prioritized those, and we added some other ones for discussion, and then we came up with them.
Yeah, I had another suggestion. And should we think about having an approach whereby we ask some of our committees and commissions to come up with a couple of their goals, to bring them to the table here? Meaning that, what are the goals of the Parks and Rec? What are the goals of the library, DP, you know, some of these different solid waste commissions? What are some of their goals that they see? We can then, you know, bring them to this table, because we don't have all the ideas. We don't have all the ideas, and they may have some things that they want to see, you know, accomplished.
or we can see how they fit in with.
And see how they jive in.
Because if
but-
we took 1 or 2 goals from each one of these committees and we added it to our goals, we're gonna have like 30 goals.
No, I'm not saying that, I guess, yeah, how do they mesh with ours?
Well, that's what I meant.
And the other thing too is that, let's just say that a committee or commission has a very ambitious goal. We may say, you know what, I don't know how it's gonna fit into our goals for this year. They may fit into our medium term, or shorter, or medium term goals, but they're not gonna fit into our goals for this year.
And I think we should also, committees, I think we should also try to incorporate, we usually do, but our departments that we have.
Right.
Departments and committees, and see how everything, throw it all together and see how it comes out. Okay? Does that seem okay? So, we all have a copy of, that were in
Last
that
week's?
packet, I
Yep.
believe. I think they're in the 21st one. I had gone through and crossed out some of them, so if, next week is a good week to do that. I don't know how big of an agenda we have for next week, but I would like to probably have a half hour for this.
Half hour?
Actually, we probably won't have enough time to fully do it, because we won't be able to meet
Meet
with
with
all the
your
committees
committees.
and have that kind of a discussion.
I was gonna say, you're not gonna have.
But I think what we could do
By the
is
end of
probably
April?
go through them and cross off the ones and take what we have perhaps and condense that down to something. Okay,
Probably call your department heads too.
as far as department heads, because
Bring that
most of them have probably met already and gone through department goals on that, so it would be having a discussion with with our other committees. And if the committee just met, what you might do is perhaps give the chairman a call, make sure that's something on the agenda, or it might be something that you could pick up in a 5-minute conversation. I mean, like, HDC, I know what their goal is. I think we all know what their goal is, so Parks and Rec, we have kind of an idea what their goal probably is. Well, you've been Parks and Rec, you know a little bit more than, okay. But then again, I'm gonna ask him about the library, even though you are the library rep now, but I'd ask him, so. Same thing. I know.
So you still want to schedule half hour next week for discussion
Uh,
of goals?
I don't think we're gonna need a half hour then at this point, unless anybody here does.
Got a library card, Scott? Can we tell the story?
No.
Come on, it's funny.
Sounds like an after-meeting one.
Yeah, I know, I know. Okay.
I thought it was funny anyway.
No, I would probably say,
15 minutes?
maybe 15 to 20 minutes then. Okay, so that covers that. Anything else on the new business?
I do.
What's that?
I need the board's direction on the 250th.
Okay.
We're having a meeting on Thursday I know I talked to you about this, but, Lieutenant Mark, who has been phenomenal as representing the police department. One of our activities is a block party, and, the discussion is to block off part of Church Street in a staggered fashion up to the fire department where that is, and then to block off Depot Street after 6 p.m. on Saturday night for the fireworks, and probably close off Mill Street. And I just wanted to make sure that you didn't have, provided that the police department and fire department and public safety is okay with all this. I just didn't want it to be a big surprise, some of these discussions that we're having.
I have one question.
Yeah.
What's your plan to let the residents of these streets?
Scott Bartlett gave me a list of abutting property owners. I've already drafted a letter, which I can send to you. We're gonna talk about it at our Thursday's meeting. Once we have fine-tuned that letter, it'll go to the board for review, and it will go to all of the abutting property owners and businesses that may be affected.
Do you have any idea how many we're talking about? Are we talking 25, 50? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I don't have the map with me, but we did it a little bit more than what we thought it would be, and I think it was a total of 60 properties.
Okay.
We did Mill Street, obviously, we did Main Street, we did parts of Church Street, part of Depot. So it doesn't go past like New England sheet metal. doesn't go past the fire station. Although there might be some detours which might affect. Kendall Hadley Way would also be closed the whole day.
One thing that might be also a good idea to include with that, a schedule of the events that are planned so that people.
Yeah,
know
we're gonna, yeah, I
besides
have,
just the
we have all of that, yep. And the other issue that I just wanted to make you aware of, and again, it's been talked about in our committee meetings, is it's gonna be a block party with food vendors, children's entertainment, and live bands from probably 12 PM, 12 noon, till about 8:30, when the fireworks would then be shot off. So there will be live music. I don't think there will be any infringement in terms of the noise ordinance, but we will need assistance from Mark and Bill Connor, because when we have food vendors, we gotta make sure that those folks are all, you know, fine, and, but, you know, Bill's on our committee, and we have police and fire representation, on the committee, so I just wanted to, you know, let's let you know what some of the plans are, so that there are no, you know, surprises. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm trying to take the pulse of this board, department heads, et cetera, all throughout, because I don't want anybody saying, well, we can't do that, because now we're at the time where we're signing contracts with bands, we're trying to get a stage and music, and I will also have for you next Monday, Sue, I will have a contract for a sound system and possibly a stage. Reason being that because we're doing live music for about 8.5 hours, we're having 45-minute sets of music, and it has to be plug and play. We can't have people lugging amplifiers on and off stages, so we have to rent a sound system, and we'll also have to have somebody who is a sound technician there with a, what do you call that, a mixing board, et cetera, so that has to happen. So you will have a recommendation from the 250th committee for Monday to sign a contract for that. So that's why I'm just trying to let you know, because these things happen in the summer, and we have to book it now.
Is that during the day, the bands?
12 noon to either 8 or 8:30 PM.
Any questions?
In between gaps, we'll have DJ Gross playing along.
No, we won't have DJ. And also, you know, we're looking at the possibility of a children's stage, and maybe Manchester may be able to help us out. They have a portable stage, and Nick is working on that for us. And there'll be children's entertainment, same type of thing with a, whether it be a magician or, you know, a children's music artist, that type of stuff.
Actually, I do have one question, though. I mean, obviously, when you start talking stages and bands, I take it there's not going to be a rain date, this is gonna be a go forward?
There will not be a rain date, and I have to work with the school district on this, because my thought process is that I cannot do anything about the bands. If it rains, the fireworks company, if we know we have a forecast of rain, as long as they don't set up, we can have a rain date. But on the bands, I don't have a rain date. I don't have a rain date on the stage or on the sound system. So I have to talk to the school district about the possibility of using the high school gym for the bands, and then putting the food vendors in the back cafeteria, and having the children's area in that middle gym, and try to work it like that. Well, we'll have some occupancy issues. I have to talk to the fire department and police department about, we can only allow so many people in the venue, but it's better than nothing. So that's kind of where we stand. The stage itself will have protection for, you know, drizzle or something, but and that was part of the condition. The bands wanted, you know, what do you call it, a stage with an overhang.
Any question, is everybody okay with that? Okay.
And one more thing I forgot to mention, town hall parking lot will also be closed, because that's where we're gonna either put the music or we're gonna put the kids area in this parking lot, because we need power.
I have one question.
Yeah.
We'll make sure how we're gonna close the parking lot, because I don't recall ever having to do it, so the question is, let's make sure that.
Yeah, that's where I have to defer to the police department and fire department on all these. I mean, they're the experts in terms of, you know, traffic and public safety, so I'll defer to them. The other thing that I did, just so you know, I did ask Sue to check into is, we have a private landowner who has offered, the Blondo family has offered us to use that field that's on Kendall Hadley Way. We have to get in touch with Vivian and Ray. We may have to have like a hold harmless agreement in terms of things like that. And Sue is also in the process of contacting PSNH to draw power off that pole so that we could, power it up if we put the stage there. So there's a few
Now,
things.
is that pole in a public right of way?
It is being currently taxed as well, so.
Okay.
So if you have any questions, please call me, or if you have any ideas, or if you see anything that looks like it's an obstacle, definitely want to know about it. The letter to the abutters will hopefully go out in a couple of weeks. We're also going to have a meeting with all of those. We're going to put in that letter. I've already written the draft, that we're going to hold a public meeting to discuss any concerns and to review our preliminary plans
Right.
with them.
Okay.
And I've already had some conversations with, Larry Brown at Ace and Apotheca and some business owners that I frequent. I've talked to them about it. Vivian I've spoken to, obviously.
Okay,
But
great.
the big thing will be the bank and the post office. That's still gonna be open until like noon or 1 o'clock, so we'll probably close off the street before then, but, before that point, but they'll have to come in the back way to get to.
I was gonna say, because the post office, it's federal.
Correct.
So there might
Right.
be.
We can't do anything
right.
there.
They have
And I've
to-
talked to the fire chief in terms of, he'll position his trucks in such a way that he may stage them in another location, during the day, so that,
Okay.
that we can get, quick response. So I think I'm very confident with the police and fire department, on the committee that we'll be all set.
Okay. Any other questions, concern? Okay, no, thank you.
All right.
It's a lot of work and appreciate what you're doing.
You're gonna follow up on our costumes.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, that'll be on June 17th, just so you know, it's a Friday. And Hannaford has donated our anniversary cake.
Oh.
And Carol Witcher's family has donated the musical entertainment for that day. It's gonna be at the Bel Airs, they're a doo-wop band, and they're gonna be on the Common, so, yeah, things are starting to
Okay.
come together, and supposedly, we're gonna get the colonial garb, is that what we're gonna be getting?
Period.
Period, yeah.
Period?
Period garb.
Period garb, okay.
You remember that stuff, right, Bill?
Yes, we only need 4 costumes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I have,
What
I
a-
have something.
Go ahead, Nick.
I just want to bring the board up to speed. As you know, we discussed the pedestrian bridge
Oh, yeah.
and the fact that Manchester is investigating through a TE grant, the purchase of either that bridge or an alternate bridge, but a clear span type bridge over the Kelly Falls impoundment. The filing period is also opening up now for the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Grant, which is funding for projects that can potentially reduce the damage either prior or in anticipation of flooding. So we will be filing a letter of intent in the city for the removal cost of the trestle.
Do we need to sign in on that as endorsing the project? Would that help?
That would help. I'll also be working with Sue. I'm gonna need damage figures to provide them with a cost-benefit analysis of removing that trestle. But one of the questions that I had for the board pertaining to a soft match, would there be any consideration of the board if there was soft matches that we could utilize maybe our public works to assist on our side to assist in the removal of the bridge as part of, or the trestle? And that's just throwing it out. I have nothing solid on that, but would that be something to consider, utilizing some of our personnel as part of the soft match?
Well, I think it would depend on what's being required, obviously.
Absolutely. What it is, what equipment's needed. Like I said, it's
I'd be
very
open to that.
preliminary, but I just wanted
Depending upon
to
what it is.
throw that out there first to see if there
Is
was
the
any
other side of
interest.
the town of Goffstown?
No.
Is it out, it's
Well, I
not
think-
in our town?
Well, that was the question that I was gonna have, because I'm not sure where the line is there, because that trestle might.
Line are you
Prop-
referring
boundary?
The
line.
boundary line with
That'd
the.
be a
Let's
no.
ask our
to?
perambulation
line.
specialist.
You know where the rear gate of Surratt Field is?
Yeah, that's what I was
That's where it
thinking.
is.
It's
Yeah.
about 100 yards towards Manchester. It's about 1/4 into the Orange Pond. So it's a quarter of a mile from the Piscataquag River.
So, the bridge is actually in Manchester.
Entirely.
Yeah.
1/4 of a mile
Right.
into Manchester.
So, in response to your question, in order for us to have our people there, somehow there has to be some type of an understanding or release or something, because we would be having our people actually doing work in Manchester. So that's something that's gotta be addressed there.
But I just wanted to get a preliminary, if you completely said absolutely not, I wouldn't go any further with even investigating.
I don't know what equipment we would have. It's different than Public Works.
It might be manpower,
Yeah, it could be
So
nothing
it
but
comes down to
hauling
man-
something, just something that would go
Hauling.
towards a soft
okay.
match, or.
Yeah,
Hauling.
yeah, I mean, might include a piece of equipment, loading something onto a flatbed or something, I don't know.
Underwater cutting tools.
I see this as a win-win. If we can remove that trestle and the obstruction, that's a win-win for our community.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. All right. Yes, sir.
No.
You don't wanna move on?
Move on, sir.
Be stuck in old business? Okay. Committee reports, HDC. HDC met last week, and I was trying to remember what we did, but I had planning board.
Didn't have a quorum.
That's right, we did not, that's right.
There's no business to remember.
We need alternates.
We do,
We need more.
I know. You volunteering?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't take any formal action.
No, we couldn't take any formal action, we just had some preliminary discussion and.
That's your committee, Phil.
Yeah, I know.
We respect that.
Okay,
That was a short report, huh?
okay. Okay, so the next one going on is Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission met last week, and the Open Space Committee gave a report. They have some projects in the works. It was premature for them to discuss it publicly. They also discussed the Blackbriar Woods recommendation from the Board of Selectmen, and they voted as a commission to also support our recommendation to the Planning Board, which met the following Thursday. The largest item of discussion, which took up pretty much the whole meeting, was a Piscataquag watershed land conservation plan. This plan was put together by Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. It was started back in 2009, and it involved 11 communities, the 11 Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission communities. And basically what it did is it took various GIS layers, a layer of critical soils, a layer of wildland habitat, a layer of floodplain, I mean, it just goes on. And then it gave each of those layers a value based on 100. So total, all of the layers added up to 100, but something like prime farmland soils had a 6% value. They mapped all of those various layers, and then they ended up with what was called a co-occurrence, where they basically cumulatively looked at all the various layers, the weighted items, and they came up with what was called conservation core focus areas. And it identified what the plan felt were those areas within each of the communities that should be the primary focus of conservation efforts. The recommendation, and all of the Conservation Commission signed off on this, as well as ours. There were comment periods provided where written comments were taken, or the Planning Commission came and met with Conservation Commissions and took feedback. And then the idea is for these, this is draft now, but once it's finalized, for it to actually be adopted by the Planning Board as part of the master plan. When the Conservation Commission read through it, they had concerns, and there were concerns voiced throughout the process, from what my understanding is, in that the data, the underlying levels of GIS mapping was not complete. So there are members of the commission that felt that this is a flawed map, that there are areas within town that should be focused on that are not represented here. So they're looking to go back to Southern New Hampshire Planning and basically explain what they felt the shortfalls were, and provide feedback.
Do they
into
have the
that.
data to support what their assumptions are?
I would say a yes and a no. In some areas, yes. I don't know if they've done wildlife studies to be able to support that. But when you look at the maps, one of the issues brought in, when you look at the wildlife GIS mapping, it's really areas that Fish and Game had relatively good access to, that had really good data, whereas other areas really weren't mapped very well.
Didn't they have a UNH student do a natural resources inventory at one time? Was that used as a?
Yeah, they have a listing of everything that was used, and there was a large number of different databases that were utilized for it. The concern is, and I'll be honest with you, the concern is that 4 or 5 years from now, a project comes up and a board, maybe the planning board, the Board of Selectmen, looks at this map and says, you know, it's not really an area of focus, so we really shouldn't be conserving that. So their concern is that this is a flawed document and it shouldn't be adopted as such, or if adopted, with some caveats, with some, you know.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I know two people can look at something, the same thing, and have a different opinion. I guess I'm curious that why would Southern New Hampshire's assessment be different? So we're gonna get something from conservation that says, here's what Southern New Hampshire planning stated were certain values, shall we say. Here's where we disagree with them, because this is the data that supports why we believe. Are we gonna get that?
Well, I believe they're even prior to that, they're looking at going back to Southern New Hampshire and showing them the minutes
Right.
from when they met with Southern New Hampshire to say, these are the issues we had
And they have
when
a-
this plan was being drawn up, but you didn't address them in the final draft.
Who has the ultimate authority to accept that plan? Is it the Conservation Commission, or is it this
I
board
believe the
or planning
Conservation
board?
Commission would provide a recommendation to the planning
Planning
board.
board,
Planning
okay.
board would
Okay.
ultimately adopt anything to their master
Okay.
plan.
Thank you. All right. Next, I think, was the planning board. Planning board did have a few items on the agenda, and we had our two new members, John Heichel and Mark Warden. They attended, and we had the site plan for the project next to the library. Mr. Seltzer's plan there, which was approved with a few conditions. And what came out of that was everybody agreed. The library trustees were in support of the project and the plan. You know, because they had concerns with the easement area there, the access and the easement area. And all those issues had been all ironed out when they came with the proposal, and everybody was happy, and that was approved. The other project that we had was the Bourneville project that was over at 114 and 114A, requesting a time extension, and also a request to remove the 55 or older requirement from it. The plan did grant a time extension, and had a, you know, there was a discussion about that 55 and older, and that's something that's gonna have to be looked at to see if there were things that were perhaps approved because it was a 55 and older, and now without that, if there was some things that needed to be addressed, and also the fact that it was, this was the third extension to see what other, if there were any other zoning changes along with drainage that may have been effectuated between now and, or when they come back in their original approval. They also accepted the Blackbriar subdivision. They voted to accept the change that the PLC would be the owners of the open space, and wanted to ensure that PLC submitted open space covenants for the land that ensured that the space would remain as such. So that's a subject to. and they also agreed with the suggestion by the Board of Selectmen that the area be reserved for potential future parking areas with that. Of course, they added the condition that we go back to them for approval, which I told them the board always does. And the final one was a conceptual presentation by the Cumberland Farms across the street over here in the village to make a change. They're looking at basically demolishing the building, changing its location, and putting in one less pump, and just changing the flow of the traffic, so instead of being parallel, the building will be set back towards the property line, which the neighbors or the abutters that are in the back are happy to see, because it'll eliminate the snow that's been piled up there and draining down to them, because the building will be there and the snow will no longer be towards the back. And also the flow of traffic will be a little bit different. And Cynthia Bover was there for Main Street and said that Main Street was in support of the project. So we look forward to them coming back at some time in the future. And that's the result of the planning. And I don't know if there was any, Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec did not meet last week, but they met the week before, and I reported on it last week, so I'm not quite sure why it's here.
Well, I thought you wanted to
But if you
report
want
on
to hear
it
the same
again.
report over again, I will gladly.
I
do
thought
that.
it was to bring the new member up to speed. That's
Okay.
okay, you can meet with him privately and bring him up to speed, that's okay. For the sake of moving on with our meeting and trying to keep on schedule. If there's any other public business that we have? Yes.
Just as a request, maybe a future agenda item. I know at this last town meeting, we passed the warrant article regarding tax incentives for renovations of building.
Mhm.
I think it would be prudent for the board to, in advance of our first application coming in, sit down and hammer out what the criteria are. This way, we're doing it objectively, and we're not accused of, saying yes to one person, no
I
to
think-
another, and we have some.
And I think not only that, so we have the criteria, so it is fair, but also, after we do that, if we truly are trying to assist taxpayers,
Communicate.
then we need to communicate what this process is to, and maybe EDC can help us,
Right.
do that, but I would hope that people would take advantage of this. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think we have to review everything that passed and how we're gonna implement everything. We usually do that in April.
Right. Right. But I think in the meantime, that might be something that perhaps EDC could take a look at.
Yep.
And, because I know that we had the criteria that was
Right.
stated in the statute, but there were other things that were kind of left up to the discretion of the board for what they were, so there might be some things that,
Their meeting tomorrow, I'll bring it up and to see if they have though they did have that list, you're looking for a more comprehensive recommendation.
well, or maybe some
Criteria,
suggestions
yeah.
of some of the things for us to look at, so we
Right.
can put something together.
No problem.
And,
Or, like a scorecard, something like that,
Yeah, something that might be given to somebody who's considering the application, take a look at and see, gee,
This is what we weigh,
yeah, this is what.
Good. Good.
Okay? Okay, if there's no other
Yes,
public business.
We have in our packet a draft of a fire response agreement, and there's a textual list of streets, and if any of you wish to have a graphical portrayal of where those streets are, I offer this for your,
Did you make this up yourself?
I offer that for your viewing enjoyment.
He's the map maker.
Yeah.
Additionally, I'd also ask the chief for the numbers of responses to those locations. And for a 5-year average, we respond to to our area about 11 times a year, where we would now be responding about 8 times per year to the New Boston area. So New Boston would probably be coming in about 11 times. We'd be going out about 8 times on average per year for fire calls to those areas.
But it's safe to say we do that anyway as a backup, but then we would just be primary to that area?
Yes, as well as medical calls, we would be gaining the revenue primary to those areas.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I just ask Sue a question first?
While she's If this is something that pans out, are we thinking about doing this with, say, Bedford or another adjoining town where maybe their response could be quicker in a certain
No, but-
part of town? I mean, I think of Bedford, is it possible that they could reach some of our properties in Shirley Hill, you know, that, I mean, is there any?
If I
I
may,
know of one off of, their Terrell Hill Road.
Right. I was just curious, I was just curious, is that
The other
something that?
Terrell Hill.
Well,
Yeah.
The other
You have the
Terrell Hill
issue of, over in part of Goffstown, that's over Riverview Park. I mean, there's another one.
and this wasn't driven by response times per se, as it
This
was
was
by.
ISO
ISO
ratings.
ratings.
ISO
Because of mileage.
Right.
Right.
Those particular areas are outside the,
And
the
other than that,
required-
we don't really have anything that's like that, and that's the Bedford or Manchester type border, or Dunbarton, or?
I don't know, but I'm just saying,
Okay.
it wasn't response time driven, it was,
There's a few, but that's
it was insurance
Good.
rating.
good food for
Right.
thought for,
Yeah.
future.
Because the good, I mean, the plus here is that this will positively impact folks' insurance rates for homeowners.
Correct.
So it's a win-win for
Both
the community,
towns.
for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
And when those municipalities provide coverage, they also receive the payment from the insurance companies for those services they render, correct?
No, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about, you
No, I'm
may
saying if
pay
an
X, $500 for your homeowner's policy.
I understand
He's
that.
talking about the payout from the insurance company,
I'm talking in regards that,
a
I
claim.
understand what you're saying, but also, if a ambulance provides service in other communities, it doesn't really matter because going back to, that fee will be charged to that insurance company for the service they render for those people.
Right, I was focusing
medical
more on the rates of homeowners.
I understand that, I was just
ISO
going,
rating, yeah.
I was just moving on to the next piece.
Okay. All right, so anything else public before we go into non-public? And I don't know if we will be coming out, when we come out of public,
We're done.
we will probably be adjourning. That's what it looks like, so everybody knows. We need a motion then to go into non-public.
I'll make a motion to go into non-public session according to RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, and we'll start off with discipline. Is that A?
That's A.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second?
Second that,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes.